Hello and good morning. According to my watch, it's 10:30. Is it for everyone?
Yeah, it is. Is it okay, Chair, if I introduce you and then hand over to you?
Perfect.
Wonderful. So it is 10:30 and we'll make a start. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for our first academic panel that is on development. We're very fortunate to have a stellar panel as well as a very capable chair, who's Dr. Kwabena Minta. Dr. Minta is a lecturer in property and valuation in the School of Property, Construction and Project Management at RMIT University, Australia. Dr. Minta has industry experience in property valuation and teaching. As part of teaching, Dr. Minta has been responsible for preparing and delivering valuation process and methods course for undergraduate students at RMIT University for several years. He has also provided teaching assistance for several undergraduate courses and assisted other colleagues in delivering postgraduate subjects at the School of Property, Construction and Project Management at RMIT. Dr. Minta's research interests are in property valuation, property development, uncertainties and risks in property development, real options valuation, valuing flexibility in property development, and property data analysis. He's published several research and conference papers on the valuation of flexibility in property development. And from that quick profile, you can see Dr. Minta is a very capable chair for the panel. So with that brief introduction, I hand over the panel to you, Dr. Minta.
Thank you so much, Ken, for that. That's a very good introduction. Thank you so much. Elated to have you talk about my credentials here. Thank you so much. I hardly hear such words. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Yeah. As Ken rightly said, I'm Kwabena Minta, so I'm based at RMIT. That's where I work. And today I am happy and very elated to chair this session and the moderators until we finish off. As I have been trained and I've come to know, I also have to actually pay my respects to the elders past and present before I move on in all the things that we do. So please indulge me to also pay my respect to our elders past and present. I acknowledge the Wunjoi people of the Kulin Nations as the traditional owners of the land on which we conduct the conference today, and I respectfully recognize the elders past and present. As you may be aware, we have our program starting at 10:30 until we finish at 12 o'clock. A bit of housekeeping rules as usual. Now that Ken has ceded his powers to me, I take over fully and I tell him to keep mute, and then everything depends on me now. So please, I am the one chairing now. Ken, I thank you very much for giving me your powers. I'm happy to hold the powers until 12. Okay, so some of the rules that we'll have today is that we'll have the presentations for 15 minutes max for each of the presenters that we have. We have 30 minutes Q&A. So what I'll do is that I'll spread the time across for our presenters. In order not to wait until we get to the end before we start coming up with our questions, I would rather want to bring in 10 minutes after every presentation. We ask questions, we deliberate on that, we discuss before we move on to the next presentation. Chances are that if we leave all questions until the end, we might have forgotten our questions for a particular presenter. I wouldn't want that to happen. So once we finish with the first 15 minutes of presentation, then we ask all our questions, we do our discussions, and then we move on to the next presenter. And per our virtual presentations, if you have any question or whatsoever, please, you know what to do. If not, there's a button there, down there on your screen. You touch on it, it will show that you have raised your hands. And then I will know that you would want to say something, and then I will call out your name. You unmute, and then you ask your questions. We'll give our presenter or whoever presents the chance to also respond to your questions. The next thing is that in case along the line you have to use the toilet, please just get outside of your room. You will find your toilet by the side where you know, and I'm pretty sure you know where it is. As we go on, I'll moderate it. For our presenters, I wouldn't be able to show you times or whatsoever. So what I'll do is that I'll come in and prompt you when it's about 5 minutes more, and then I'll prompt you finally when time is up. I hope we are good with these basic rules to start with. So today we have 3 presenters. One by Vince Dogby from the University of Melbourne, one by Dr. Charles Jan of Michael University. And then we have Faranaz Sharifi from Swinburne University speaking on different topics. One is on development for whom, the past, present, and future of people displaced by large-scale developments. And then we have women participation in community development processes from Ghana. And then we have accessing green space in Melbourne. So I'll kickstart off the presentation today with our presenter from the University of Melbourne, Vince Toby. Vince, are you there with us?
I'm here.
Excellent. So I'll give you the chance to start the presentation. According to my clock, it's 10:35. So we have 15 minutes to go. Please, over to you. Take over then, Vince. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Minta. And just want to share my screen now. Just give me a thumb up if you could see my screen. Can you all see my screen, please? Okay, thank you. So good morning, ladies and gentlemen. And it's quite exciting to know that I'm actually the first to kickstart this week's presentation as part of this conference. And it is also exciting to know that this presentation on development, which is more like a nuanced aspect of our broader team, solidarity and diversity. I'm excited and thank you all for being here today. I really want to take much time. I know a lot of acknowledgement has been done already, so I will just zoom straight into the presentation. So as you can see, title of my presentation is Development for Whom, the Past, Present, and Future of a People Displaced by Large-Scale Development Projects in Ghana. So Ghana is the context of my presentation. Okay, so just a brief outline of my presentation today. So a quick look at inclusive development, what inclusive development actually is, and then a quick review of literature. And then I would let you know about my research approach, and then the context of this paper or research, and then some preliminary findings, and then my own reflections, and of course, references. So to begin with, the question I'm asking is, so what is inclusive development? I mean, like I said earlier, so this particular presentation on development sort of is a nuanced aspect of the broader theme of diversity, solidarity in diversity. And that is the question of inclusion and exclusion in development. So what is inclusive development? So it is a term that emerged in the 21st century and is seen as a multidisciplinary approach to development. It is according to Gupta and Paul, 2016. And it is also important to note that this concept or this approach is often seen as a contested term in 4 distinct ways. And these are the ways, so development is seen in a light that it is much broader than just growth or degrowth. This is one distinct way in which we can view or see development. It is much broader than we can see in terms of growth, if you want to measure what development actually is. Another aspect or distinct way in which we want to view, or we can view development, is the content of the development itself. And I mean, if I say content, I mean, so for instance, the satisfaction. Okay, so let me say it this way. So if development is much broader or much more than growth, then what is it then? So then it is then seen as a concept that should involve a number of things, and it should include, for instance, the content of development itself should focus on satisfaction of the social and the economic human right of people. And another aspect is that if you look at the content of development, it should also go into meeting basic needs of people, and also consider in the reduction in poverty, enhancing well-being, financial inclusion, and also encouraging participatory development. So if you want to talk of, or want to look at the content of development, these are some areas that I think attention is focused on. If we agree that it is not just about growth or degrowth, or say a stable state or a steady state. Another aspect or distinct way to view development is the level or the content of inclusiveness itself. So in this sense, I'm looking at the term inclusiveness in the context of development. And in this case, it involves, or it tries to look at recognizing the needs or disadvantaged or marginal people in the society. So acknowledging that there are marginal and disadvantaged people, minority people in a society whose needs to be taken account of. It also includes participation in policy as well as politics. It also includes looking at some peri-urban needs or special needs of people, particularly in other areas, remote areas. So, I mean, the level at which these people are included, or the level at which attention is given to their needs, is also something that needs to be taken account of in terms of the inclusivity of development. Another area is multiple sources of knowledge, to also acknowledge the fact that there are multiple and diverse sources of knowledge, one of which could be the indigenous knowledge systems of societies. So development should also embrace the indigenous knowledge systems of societies. And so this is the inclusiveness aspect of as a distinct way of looking at development. And maybe finally, the other distinct way in which to look at inclusive development is the content of inclusive development as a whole in itself. So in this case, you may want to not just focus on social economic development. You may not want to just focus on not just the political or the economic human right of people, but you want to look at the broader view and the all-encompassing aspect of development. So you want to look at the social, the economic, the ecological, the political needs of people. So it is all-encompassing, it is all involving, not just the social, not just the economic, not just the political, but every aspect, every fiber of the society is given attention and is paid some credit in terms of development, intervention, or pursuit. Okay, so in terms of some literature discussion about inclusive development, for instance, and in which resettlement is a part in terms of practice of development through large-scale project, where sometimes people need to be displaced and resettled. So a good part of the literature, for instance, would focus or sees resettlement, for instance, as an opportunity for development. So the fact that you are moving people from their familiar areas, their familiar territories, there's that focus on need to ensure that it's seen as an opportunity to engender some development for the people. You know, their lives must be better than they were, and their systems, their provisions, their environment, everything about their well-being needs to be enhanced compared to the state in which they were before. And a good part of the literature also seems to focus on the inevitable risks that are often associated with resettlement. The fact that you're moving people or you're resettling people, there are some inherent risk that it comes with. And the literature focuses on a few of these, which I just want to highlight. So one of such could be loss of job, another could be loss of land, loss of shared property or common property, social disintegration, increased mobility and mortality, loss of access to education, and reduce access to good health. So as people move about, and this is not voluntary, it is involuntary as a result of some project. These are the areas of the persons or the community or the people that are likely to be affected. So the literature gives or pays much attention to this possible risk that are associated with the issues of involuntary or forced resettlement. Okay, and this is some approach that I used in order to delve into this research. So in terms of primary data, I had to conduct in-depth interviews, observe directly, and also by participation. I also have to listen to people who have been part or who were affected directly by the relocation or by the resettlement, and then also listen to people who happen to receive information about this resettlement process. They were not there in person, but the information had traveled from generation to generation, and they're in a position to also tell the story. And beyond that, I also took advantage of some document sources, archival data, and print media, newspapers and magazines, all of which talks about this subject of resettlement and the stance of inclusion or exclusion. Yeah, so just the context of it. So the picture you see here, I don't know how it's appearing on the screen, but to my left, the question is, to what extent is this community that is to my right included in the picture or the image, the dam image in my left? We are talking about inclusion and exclusion. This beautiful, magnificent development intervention. To what extent, and this was the area in which the communities to my right were living, and they had to sacrifice their land, they had to sacrifice their resources, they had to sacrifice their territories, their familiar territories, just so this important development intervention can take place. So the question is, to what extent is this community included? To what extent is their needs and their well-being included in this project, as we see? And so this is some pictorial images that I want you to look at and to think about and to compare and to see how, how these communities are, involved or considered in planning for such a development project. Okay, before then, I would like to say that, so before, like I rightly said before, so these people were occupying that geographical area, that space before the dam. And this, in terms of, just give you a bit of their cultural and ethnic identities. So in all, there were about 5 cultural groups and identities that were represented in those areas. So for instance, the people before their resettlement had different cultures and separate identities. So the Eves, and this includes the Eves, the Ikwamus, all of these are in Ghana. So most of you might not be familiar with it, so just bear with me. And so the Kwamus, the Gonjes, the Krobos, the Guans. So these were people who were living together as a community, as a population, as one people, though with different cultural groups and identities. And in terms of their family organizations, of course, they had their own housing types and space, of course, the wattle and dap building types. But it is important to know that despite this type of housing in which they were living, they had a lot of rooms to accommodate the size of their families. So, well, it may be a typical traditional building, wattle and dap building, but it also has a lot of rooms to accommodate the size of the families that exist, or the members of the family that exist in the household. So typically we would see a family size of 3 to 8 members living in the same compound, living in the same, compound, and, sharing the same compound, and have a strong family support system and all that. And it is also important to note that, of course, it's a typical farming community. So you have 85% of the population being farmers, 10% being fishermen, and about 5% being petty traders. And religion, of course, most of them were adherents of the Christian religion, some being Muslims and others being of the African indigenous religion. Okay, but this is the question, or this is the content of some observations. So after they have been removed from their familiar places and resettled, the family size remains the same. Of course, the same 3-5 family size, making a household. But the sort of housing that were provided for them, a typical design of the housing that was provided for these people was sort of 2-bedroom, 2-porch housing types. Unfortunately, just one of the bedrooms of such housing design was ready for occupation. And so you can imagine the discomfort that they had to go through. 3 to 8 people squeezing themselves in just one single room. And you can just imagine the trauma that they had to go through. And so the idea is that they were to complete the housing by themselves with support, with some building material support provided by the government. But unfortunately, this was never the case. They never had a chance to receive those items with which they could complete their housing facilities. And also, it is important to also note that, so...
Sorry, Vince, we have 5 minutes more for you.
Thank you. So it is also important to know that in relocating these people, there was a need for some compensation to be given. And the basis of the compensation that needs to be given to these marginal minority groups that are affected by this development project is the outcome of the valuation of their properties, their lands, and whatever economic asset that they had. It is on the basis of the evaluation of these things that the compensations are determined. And nevertheless, their participation in this valuation process was not even countenanced. They were not that involved in valuing those properties. And so compensation was solely done by the resettling authorities, which of course is not, shouldn't be the case. Their views and thoughts needed to have been taken into account. And okay, moving beyond that, so having moved to these communities, and one other observation that came out was that there's the continued hostilities and harassment by the host communities of these people, simply because the host communities feel that their land on which these resettler communities have come to be resettled have not been compensated for. And so there continues to be this tension, this conflict and harassment of these people who had to give way for such a development project to take place. And also, it is also unfortunate to note that, for instance, members of these communities, resettler communities, do not have the right to even pass on any land resources to their younger generation, because their legitimacy over the lands is even in question, let alone to pass on a parcel of land to their younger or descendant to probably live on or to survive on. And this also posed a challenge and put at risk the younger generation, the risk of impoverishment, because of course they have no access to land. They cannot pass on land resources to their younger generation because their legitimacy over the land, their resettlement on the land is even being challenged by the host communities. So it is something that they had to continue to battle with and contend with. Okay, so these 2 pictures you see here. So just last 2019, you see this member of parliament, for instance, Roxanne, who on the floor of parliament was calling the attention of government to respond to the needs of these people, And unfortunately, this is what the then Minister of Energy had to say. According to this minister, There are no records at all by VRA as to who has been compensated or not. There are no records. And for you to know, VRA is the official institution or agency that is responsible for the management and utilization of water bodies in Ghana. And this is the agency that is saying, and this is the minister who oversees this ministry or this agency, saying that the agency or the institution has no records of people who have been affected, and that they don't have records of people who need to be compensated. And so the question is, so in attempt to trying to provide some support and to bring the needs of these people to the attention of the government, this is the response that the Minister of State had to say, which wasn't quite a welcoming one. So the struggle continues between resettler and host communities over ownership of the land, legitimacy over the land on which the resettler communities have come to live and to survive on. And so it also begs the question, the feeling of the resettler communities and members of these communities feeling victims rather than being partners of this development project. So they keep asking themselves, are they really victims of this project, or are they seen as some sort of partners to the development project? Regardless of the national contribution and all that this is yielding, that the dam and its benefit and operation is, yielding to the country, these people keep asking the questions whether they are indeed victims or partners. These are some reflections. So for these affected people, the inequality in the benefit sharing of the revenue that are generated from the dam operations has become the source of animosity towards the Volta Dam, despite its numerous contributions to the nation. So the fact that they don't have to share, they don't see themselves sharing in the benefits that generate from the dam operation, makes them angry and have some feeling of resentment towards the project and the dam. And also, contrary to government view, the degree of inclusiveness as assumed in this development intervention is in doubt, because the government, for them, they think they've done their best, and that they've done their best in meeting the needs of the people, including the views and the thought of the people. But you get down to the people, you listen to them, you listen to their views, their experiences, and you come to conclusion that the level of inclusiveness that the government is touting to have really involved in this whole process is in question. And this is some reflections that I think I came by in the course of this research. So basically, this is my own reflection on this journey of research, and also to say that it is a work in progress, and hopefully I hope to come out with more concrete conclusions when it is all done. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Vince, for such a wonderful presentation. Lovely one. And I love it because it touches on my expertise a little bit. So yeah, thank you so much for that. At this point, I will invite the audience, whoever has questions or observations or some sort of insights to share, to raise your hand up, and then I'll quickly give you a call, and then you can share with us what you think. Anyone with questions? Seems no one is coming, so I would ask my questions. Vince, please indulge me. Yes. When it comes to the compensation payments, I think you are looking at the past. Did you take any sort of time to look at, in present day, how they deal with compensation issues, particularly community involvement in these areas?
So these were supposed to have been documented right during the planning. The resettling authorities needed to have taken into account people that needs to be compensated and their needs properly documented. But as it stands now, there are even no documentations in that regard. So in terms of determining who needs or who deserves compensation, it's even in doubt. I come from a family where some aspect or part of the family were victims. I know sometimes because you have to really push forward for this, really push forward, sometimes have to indulge legal pursuit and all that. And if you do not have the means, so what I notice is that there are present victims at the moment who are not even able to pursue what is due them because they don't have the means to pursue what was entitled to them. They don't have the means to pursue, to use legal means or other means to draw the attention of the government or stakeholders or international bodies to what they are going through at the moment. So it is the people who would have to give you the information, who would have to let you know what they are going through. But in terms of official document, there's nothing of a sort that shows who is deserving of what compensation.
Yeah, thank you so much for your response. That's a great response. And actually, I think that for that particular specific case study, you are right, because it was done in the 50s or 60s?
65, yeah.
Correct, so you are right. However, I think that in present day, we have actually made some progress. If you would look at some of the mining areas where compensation has been paid to affected persons, actually these days, and I did a few projects like that, where land acquisition cases, the community would appoint their own valuer, and then the government will bring its own valuer, so they do the valuation, and then there are discussions to arrive at a specific point. But then also, I think that one point you made that was relevant was the fact that people now feel that they cannot bequeath their land holdings to their generations. And then in mining communities, what is happening now is that after they have taken their compensation, then they come back because they realize that the compensation was not enough.
Yeah.
Now they don't have livelihood again. So your study is really excellent. And it's something that I think that if you can also sort of come up with a bit of the legal regime that we have for land ownership in terms of a bit of it in Ghana.
Yeah. This is in a broader,
But yeah, in a broader perspective,
this is in a broader,
customary land ownership. Customary land gives you ownership, yet you have to go through common law regime to actually secure your ownership, which brings some sort of issues in there. And as a result, you find out that there are complexities really underlying these processes. So you may want to actually touch on those ones too. Yeah. Those are my observations. Anyone with questions? If there is none, then we may want to move on. Ken, I saw your hand somewhere. Okay, Ken, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So very interesting presentation, Vincent. And maybe I'd like to pick up from the previous comment and build on that. And the issue of compensation is quite interesting as a mechanism, because on the one hand, you find policymakers and technocrats who are involved in these development projects frame compensation as a way of getting ownership or legitimacy of the development projects from the target communities. So from your research, what is the view of the communities in terms of compensation? Do they think it's an adequate enough mechanism, the way it's viewed by the policymakers and technocrats, or do they have a different perception of compensation, of the compensation mechanism?
So I might say that from this research, you could see that even at the time of negotiations and discussions, the people do not even really fully understand the essence or the impact of compensation, and they were not fully represented. So as long as government says, hey, this is what we are going to give you, for them, they think, in their view, they think that that was enough, that monetary compensation that was set to be given them, for them, they thought it was enough. But it was until they moved to the site, their new localities, that was where they began to actually see the realities of relocation or resettlement. And also in their views, for them, from the literature point of view, compensation is not even sufficient to restore such a people. Compensation is just an aspect of trying to restore and rehabilitate the people. And so the people, for them, in their own perspective, they feel that not just the compensation, some monetary or some non-monetary value that needs to be given them, but finding ways and means to establish them such that they can continue their livelihood. So for instance, maybe capacity building, or giving them some credit, or maybe introducing some mechanized agricultural systems as also a part of compensation by which they can continue to live and to sustain their families and households and all that. And all these are different from some monetary value that might be given them. So they see it in diverse, not just in one stream, but in multiple ways. Unfortunately, these were not really taken into account in that light by the authorities. Yeah.
Thank you. Matthew?
Yes, thank you, Vincent, for the wonderful presentation. I just have a quick question, which is also related to the issue of compensation. It's clear from your research or your presentation that the compensation that the government gives to the individuals who are affected seems to be inadequate. Do you think the government has taken advantage of the people's inadequate engagement of it to undercompensate them, or the people have not been able to negotiate well for a better deal?
In my view, I think that one, the government was just overly focused on the project. They were overly focused on what they stand to achieve, stand to gain by putting up that development project, and not necessarily focus on the well-being of the people who are going to be affected. Because one of the arguments is that if you cannot really restore such people, then do not even undertake the project. That is one argument in the literature, for instance. If you are not in the capacity or the position to relocate them and to empower them and to help them to survive, to rehabilitate or restore their livelihoods, do not do that. But so it's two ways. The people didn't really have a better view of the whole process. They couldn't see the longer term impact of the relocation. And so we're not in the position to really argue their case out. And so they could just, it was easy for them to just swallow whatever the government offers. But my argument is that the government or the resettlement authorities should be the people to know better. They should foresee the short, medium, and longer term impact of their activities, and to make sure that these people are not left worse off or their lives are not endangered. So it's two ways, but I won't blame the community that much for their inability to negotiate strongly for, of course, but the elite, the development practitioners, the government, the resettlement, they should know better and to foresee what even the community couldn't see. Because mind you, this is an illiterate community, for instance. So they don't have the benefit of analysis and all that. And this was way back. So this was my take and my observation.
All right, thank you, Vince. I'll call our last person to ask a question. Franka, can you come with your question, please?
Yes, thank you so much, Chair. Vince, thank you for the presentation. I was wondering whether you could briefly comment on your positionality. So in your presentation, you mentioned that you come from part of Ghana that is sort of affected by this. How does that affect like your research process in terms of the data collection and your analysis of that? If you can briefly comment on that. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. So I'm really aware of my own positionality in this whole contest. But if you would allow me, I would say that in terms of the resettlement, it was spread across 4 regions of the country. The 52 communities that were affected were spread across 4 regions of the country. And my research is not based in the region where I come from anyway, because I am aware of my own biases and all that. So I've chosen to move away from the region where I was affected to a different region so that I can have a fresh view and insight into the experiences and the strategies that these other people on the other side are actually encountering and how they are managing that. So I'm careful and I'm aware of that. So that is one strategy I have adopted to make sure that I do not put myself in a way of objectivity and all that in the research. So I don't know if that answers your questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Vince. I think Franka is happy with your answer. Franka, I hope you are happy with that. She says yes, she is.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vince, for such a wonderful presentation, and those who have asked questions. This is an interesting and insightful presentation. And yeah, we can deliberate on this topic forever. It brings a lot of sort of memories here and there, but we have to move on to our next presentation. So Vince, thank you so much for your presentation. Our next presenter on the day is Dr. Charles Jang from McGill University, who is presenting on women's participation in community development process, lessons from rural Ghana. Charles, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Thank you so much, Charles, for joining us. I will hand over to you for you to then begin your presentation. If you can share your screen with us, please go ahead and then let's start. Yes, thank you.
Right. Thank you. Right, thank you very much, Minka, and thank you, Vincent. I would say your presentation really set the stage for mine. Yours really look at the community's involvement in these whole projects and how the compensations and other things are impacting on the people, or how effective those things are. I am really looking at one sector of the community. And when you talk about community development, how are they engaged or involved in it? What kind of barriers are they confronted with, and how are they able to manage these barriers? And what kind of factors really motivate them to engage in it, irrespective of the barriers and the challenges they face? So as we all know, gender inequality is really a major issue in all spheres of society. When you look at the political, the social, the economic spheres, you will see that there are gaps between men and women. And I should put this across, I'm looking at the gender binary. I'm not looking at other genders, but I'm looking at males and females in this particular context. This issue of gender inequality has really led to most communities, most institutions really looking at how they can empower women in order to ensure that women's efforts are really recognized in all aspects of society. And again, women are part and parcel or participating fully and genuinely in all processes. And when you look at the context of community development, this is also another issue, despite the fact that several efforts have been put in place to ensure that women are included, women participate in the whole processes. There are still gaps and there are still challenges and barriers facing women, more especially when you look at the global South and then Ghana to be specific. So I was interested in understanding some of these barriers and then trying to understand how these women really participate and why they do participate in these processes. So I approached this study from the transnational feminist perspective. I believe that relying on the Western feminist perspective really lead to the universalization of the experiences of women. But when you look at women experiences, context play a key role in defining the kind of experiences women have. And within the context of Africa, we have unique historical pieces that have shaped the kind of experiences women go through. So within the context of community development, I really look at it from the angle that issues like colonial experiences have really shaped the experiences of women. Class, culture, and race are all factors that have shaped the experiences of women. And we can't really say the experiences of white within the Western world is the same as the experiences of the Black woman within Ghana. So using the transnational feminist perspective helped me to really unearth some of those colonial legacies, how even capitalism and other stuff are really impacting on the level of participation of women within the context of community development in Ghana. And this is just an aspect of a larger project, which was a mixed method project. So I'm just presenting the qualitative part of it. So let me just move straight into my findings. So with regards to the barriers, one key barrier that came up was financial constraint or poverty. It was really clear within most of the transcripts or some of the narratives of the women who were interviewed for this study that money was really a barrier. When I talk about community development, I'm not only talking about community-based, community-initiated development alone. I was looking at even government, local government initiated projects as well. So this was more linked with the local government sector, whereby some of the development decisions are taken at the district assembly level, where people have to move from these rural communities to the district assembly in order to be able to engage in some of these decision-making processes. At times, some of these meetings are organized in these areas and they don't have even money to transport themselves to these centers to engage in some of these things. And that has been really a major issue. Again, an element of it was about people or women trying to really ensure that their families survive. Here is the case in this economic context we find ourselves in. Money is hard to come by. Even putting food on the table is really a problem. So because they are poor, they don't have any spare time to even engage in, if you are looking at community initiated projects. So for me to even spend 2 hours to go and sit there, I would rather go to the farm, try to go and gather some food to be able to feed my family. So it was really clear that financial constraints and poverty really work against the level of participation of women in these community development projects and processes. Another thing that came up was lateral oppression. That was women pulling themselves down. One thing I need to put across is the fact that it's not the women themselves who want to really do that, but it's rather the context within which they were brought up, the kind of socialization, the kind of ideas hovering around, the kind of norms that are really within these communities, whereby we see certain roles to be for men, certain roles to be for women. So they really have that kind of thought and ideas about who ought to do what and what. So if you're a woman and you're rather doing what they perceive to be men's role, then others will tend talking about you. And then they tend to give you some names like, oh, man, woman, this and that and the rest, and others tend to gossip about the other. So this was really a key thing, but this shouldn't be really put on the women as they tend to do that, but it's society. It's the kind of socialization they go through really shape their thoughts and ideas about some of those roles and continue to pull one another down. The next one was low self-esteem. So the kind of self-concept women have about themselves, this was also shaped by the socialization process, by the kind of patriarchal culture we have within these communities, really make women see themselves as not capable of holding certain positions. So some thought, oh, these positions are not things I can do. Or maybe I don't have the kind of knowledge, the kind of experience to be able to hold some of these leadership positions in community development. Others even feel, oh, I can't speak English, so how can I really lead some of those discussions when it comes to the local level? Because when you look at the local level decision-making processes, I'm talking about not the village level, but I'm talking about local government level. So at the district assemblies, at the municipal assemblies, and then the metropolitan assembly level, everything is done in English. And that really prevents these people. And this ties in with another finding I will talk about as I move on. So it wasn't they themselves feeling inferior, but society has really made them to feel like, oh, we can do this. Apart from the concept self-concept issue. The level of responsibility or the amount of responsibilities on women in line with or vis-a-vis the timing of some of these meetings also don't create the room for women to participate. At times, some of those meetings at the local level, at the village level, are often organized in the evenings, where men will be free to attend, whilst women are ready preparing food and doing other things. And that timing issue was really a big challenge for some of the women we interviewed. And then the kind of things they have to do, a lot of things they have to juggle within the household really prevent them from really participating in some of these meetings. Then multiple roles of women, one, they participating in reproductive roles and then participating in productive roles, really make them have limited time to even spare any little time to participate in these projects. So this was also another issue. Apart from all these, another key thing that came up was Western interference in the form of capitalism and neoliberalism. And they really hit hard on NGOs that work within these local communities. Most of them talk about how some NGOs have really tend to really give money to people just to encourage them to participate in processes. And when they come in and use this, and some use the word, they've spoiled some women with money. So if it's a community initiated project that they need to participate voluntarily, it becomes very difficult because they expect that the money they are getting from these NGOs, they should get the same thing from the communities. So it ends up preventing them from participating, because if I don't get anything out of it, I'd rather stay home and take care of my family other than really attending a voluntary meeting, which I don't see the benefit I'm going to get today. Apart from that, colonialism was also another key thing that came up. The idea I spoke about earlier on when I was talking about the self-esteem issue or the self-concept issue was about the English language as the official language for meetings and other stuff. It was really clear that the over-reliance on English language was a barrier to women's participation in local governance. And it was really clear that most people equate your level of fluency in English language with your level of intelligence. So someone who is very fluent in English, oh, this person is very intelligent. But those who cannot express themselves are not even recognized as people who are really intelligent. And that was really a problem, and that is linked up with colonization. The superimposition of the English language on the people by the colonial masters, and we accepting it and then continuing to use that. And when you look at even Ghana and look at the rate at which, or the literacy rate, you will see that women are really at the bottom as compared to men. And when you go to the rural communities, the gap is even quite wide. So in the long run, you will see that most women in these rural communities wouldn't have that level of education that will really help them to be able to be fluent in English and be able to participate adequately in community development decision-making. Apart from that, patriarchal norms and culture also came up as a key barrier to women's participation, because the society has made it look like in some of those traditional communities that, oh, a woman's place is here. You are not supposed to be here. And in some of those communities, when even decisions are being made, when people meet and decide, and I mean people, I'm talking about men. I'm not looking at people in general, but people equals men. When they meet and decide or talk about things, at times in some of these communities, when you go home, you don't have to share with your wife whatever decisions you took. And these are some of the ideas, some of the things within these communities that really restrict women and prevent women from even participating adequately in all these processes. Despite all these challenges and all these barriers, it also came out that women still participate, still try to be part and parcel of the processes within these communities. And some of the areas they participate or they participated include micro loan projects, local government systems. Some were even talking about assembly member positions and the rest. One of the communities, out of close to about 15, 20 assembly members, only one woman. And for the whole of, I think about 10, 15 years or whatever, is it 10, 15 or 20 years, they haven't had any district chief executive who is even a woman. And these are all things that are really preventing them or not giving them that kind of encouragement for women to even participate. But irrespective of this, people still try everything possible to participate in communal labor, participate in vocational training programs, educational campaigns, and some even decide to represent women at the district assembly level and then other community advocacy committees.
Charles, a few minutes more, please.
Okay, the kind of question I was asking was, okay, if they are facing these barriers, what are the factors that are really helping them or really motivating them to participate, irrespective of these challenges? And some of the things that came up include children. Some feel that, oh, what they have gone through in life, they don't want their children to go through the same thing. So because of the future of their children, they are being forced to engage in some of these things. And then familiar support, some were also receiving some support from family members. One assemblywoman indicated that, oh, my brother who teaches at GIMPA has been supporting me with proposal writing and other things. And that really pushed me to continue to contest and to get some support to help the people within my area. So these are some of the things. And another issue I would like to hit on was punishment. There has been some punishment associated with non-compliance or non-participation in communal labor and the rest. So if you don't go, you pay some fines and other stuff. So those, and this really lead to those class differences because those who can pay wouldn't show up. But the poor are always forced by some of these punishments to participate in community development process. So in short, yes, there are barriers, still women are resilient because of some of these factors. And the key issue or the key recommendation I was really talking about was the fact that all NGOs, both international NGOs and local NGOs, should really look at women's issue, not from the Western lens, but rather look at the unique experiences women are going through within these communities and be able to help them. They should be part and parcel of any kind of decision they take so that we can have the programs and activities or any solution that reflect the unique realities of these women within the context of community development. Thank you, and I welcome any questions.
Thank you very much, Charles, for your presentation. Great one. Thank you so much for touching on some of these issues in our country and bringing them to the fore for us to deal with them. I would invite the audience, whoever has got a question, to raise his or her hand up, and then I'll quickly call so that we can deliberate on it and then move on. If you're unable to also reach me, let me know. Franka, should I ask you a question from you or Nina? Are you the one asking that question?
Hi, yeah, I have a couple of questions, but I know we have limited time. Thank you so much for your presentation, Charles, a fascinating project. I'm wondering where the term lateral oppression comes from. Is that something from the literature or that you've come up with?
Oh, thank you. It's something from the literature. It looks at the same level how the other, they themselves pull themselves down. So it's from the literature and it's really from the feminist literature, looking at how women themselves, people feel they work against themselves without really looking at some of the issues, underlying issues that lead to some of these lateral oppression. So when you look at anti-oppressive literature and then oppression literature, lateral oppression is one of the key things. So it's not only looking at men, women, but women, women, or men, men.
Yep. And very quickly, I was also interested in maybe a couple of distinctions, or if there are distinctions between Afrofeminisms and transnational feminisms?
Yeah, Afrofeminism and transnational feminism, I'm not really conversant with Afrofeminism, but with transnational feminism, there are different elements. So I don't know whether Afrofeminism falls under one of those key ones. For instance, when you look at transnational feminism, we have womanism, which is mostly from the African perspective, where we look at women, their roles, and we also look at why there isn't, even when you talk about feminism, it shouldn't be a conflict between men and women, but it's about we collaborating. And we also, with the womanism, we look at the fact that Western ideas, in terms of feminism, we are really talking about struggle between the two sexes. But we don't look at that. We look at collaboration. We look at bringing men to the level of women. And we also look at the fact that, yes, childbearing should be the role of a woman. But at the end of the day, men contribute, and they should be part and parcel of the process. And if you want to change the situation of women within the context of Africa, women should be, and men should be leading that crusade. We can't do it ourselves as women. I'm not saying I'm part of women, but I'm saying from the womanist perspective, they can't do it from their own angle unless men are part and parcel. So they look at first, how do we convince men to really spearhead that kind of agenda we want to push for? So they are looking at collaboration. So as for Afrocentric perspective, I don't really know much about that, and I can't really comment on that.
Any more questions?
Yeah, I think Kathy has a question there.
Yes, Charles, if you can read and then you can answer that, that would be good.
Kathy says, I wonder, there is data about if men's reaction to the women participation. Oh, thank you very much. This is a new study I'm working on. I'm looking at male allyship and trying to look at how men are really leading that agenda. And that is the next step I am taking now. This one, I looked at just the women's perspective, and I'm now looking at men's perspective and how men are really championing the effort to increase women's level of participation in community development. So I didn't really look at that in this particular research. I'm now working on that.
Okay, excellent. There's also one from Charlene. I think it's, okay, let's listen to Simeon Grady first, and then we'll come to Charlene if we have time. Charlene has left already. Simeon, can you go with your question, please?
Yes, thank you so much. And thanks so much, Charles, for your presentation. I thought it was really clear, really kind of well structured as well. And it came across really nicely. And as other people have said, it's a really important project as well. I was wondering, to what extent did you find these barriers to participation kind of consistent across different forms of community development? You know, so for example, processes of community development related to health or to education or to even kind of conflict resolution or socioeconomic issues, for example. Did you kind of delve a little bit deeper into different forms of community development and the barriers to participation from women there? Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. All right, when we look at the different things you are talking about are the different elements or different areas of, let's say, development in terms of economic, in terms of social infrastructure development and other stuff. But in the broader context of development, I was really looking at, or let me say, I was defining community development as any effort towards the enhancement of the well-being and the welfare of the community. So I wasn't really looking at only one aspect like economic well-being. I wasn't only looking at the aspect of health alone. I was looking at every project. And the key idea was geared towards the well-being of the whole community. So it cuts across all those things, the broader community development.
All right, thank you so much, Charles, for all the responses you have provided. I've got just 1 minute for Charles's presentation. Any more questions? Supposed to end at 11:35. Any more questions? If not, we want to.
I think Joe sent something here. Oh, Joe, that is a private message. That's fine.
Patience says the mine is a comment. I don't think there is anything wrong in giving women money to participate in a community development. I think it's a way of encouraging them and at the same time explaining to them that such money is to encourage them. That's what I thought on that.
Personally, I beg to differ and I disagree with you. It depends on what you mean by community development and how you are really going about the whole process. Giving people, and that is something from the white savior perspective, whereby you go into the communities with the idea, yes, we are coming to help you solve your problems. So they go in with pre-developed initiatives and ideas and then move in with it. There are several ways to encourage people or to increase participation when we look at community development. Money given may be, but it wouldn't be able to solve the whole problem, wouldn't be able to encourage people. It's just like doing research. I have problems with even compensation. At times, people will just do what you want. They will tell you what you want to hear because they need the money you will be given after they participate in the project. So some people, I know a friend who went to a village in Ghana to do research. And when someone came and realized, oh, after everything you give me this money, people who weren't having people who are having disability were even coming in and then pretending they are taking care of persons with disability. And they were coming to cook stories for him in order to get the money that is associated with it. So it's something that has, I would say the negative will outweigh the positive in so many ways, if you are to look at it critically.
Okay, thank you so much. We have a last question coming in, but I don't know if you can do that in less than 30 seconds.
Okay.
From Alicia. She says that, do you consider gender equity rather than gender equality, since women have different starting positions in life to men?
All right, thank you very much. Personally, equality is totally different from equity, but you have to get to equality in order to get to equity, and equity to fairness. So the end goal is to ensure equity, but not equality. We can all be equal. It's just like we are all given the equal platform, but still there are things pulling women down. So we should get to a level where we all have the same access. It's just like I always use some picture for presentations when I talk about anti-oppressive practice here and there, whereby we are all given the same platform. But at the end of the day, there are some problems people may have that really need the attention of people. For instance, and the picture is like having a fence and people playing football. And then we have three people, one is very short, the other one is medium size, and the other one is tall. So when you talk about equality, we give them the same resources. At the end of the day, the one who is very tall will see more. The one who is medium will see, but the one who is short will not be able to see, unless we take the one with the tall person and add to the short person in order for all of them to really enjoy the game. Or we break the barrier, which is the system that has been put in place that are preventing people to have equal access to these resources. So I think equity should be our goal, not equality. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Charles. Thank you so much for to our audience for asking those questions. One thing that I will chip in before I move on to the next presenter is, Charles, if you might want to also look at issues where contractors who have been contracted to do projects in rural communities go in there and then pretending that the projects for the community, so the community should give them free labor resources and others. I've encountered similar ones and the community try to oppose that. So you might want to look at that as well. Yeah, but those are my sort of observations. Thank you so much for your presentation.
All right, thank you.
Yes, let's move on to our next presenter. Interesting one. Our last presenter for this particular session is Franka Sharifi from Swinburne University. She is presenting to us on accessing green space in Melbourne, measuring inequity and household mobility. I'm interested in the household mobility part because that's something that I've been working on. So shall we welcome Franka to start our presentation for us? If you are there, Franka, can you take it up, please?
Hi, everybody. Just let me share my screen and take you through my today's presentation. So could you please, all right. Can you see my screen? To just double check.
Yes, we can see. You are presenting from a web
Yeah.
sort of platform. Okay, correct.
So just give me a second. Perfect. So once again, hello everybody. I'm Franka. I'm a PhD student in the Center for Urban Transition and at the Swinburne University of Technology. Today, I'm going to present one of my PhD paper titled Accessing Green Space in Melbourne, Measuring Inequity and Household Mobility. This paper is co-authored with Associate Professor Andy Nygaard, Professor Wendy Esson, and Dr. Iris Levin, and has been published in the Journal of Landscape and Urban Planning. So I'll start with just giving you an overview of the funding. First of all, the result shows that the distribution of green space within Melbourne is skewed toward wealthier areas. And population mobility is reinforcing inequality in access to green space over time. And in addition, we found that urban planning has not succeeded in countering urban inequality trends so far. So I'll start with the introduction and taking you through the research problem, which you already are somehow familiar with. So the research problem in my case study is rapid urbanization is in many countries accompanied by rising inequality within cities. Rising socio-spatial inequality manifests itself in poorer health, higher level of mental illness, drug consumption, obesity, violence, and antisocial behaviors, and lower trust. So one way for cities to deal with manifestations of inequality is through the provision of key social infrastructures such as educational infrastructure, including school grounds or sports ovals, or the focus of this paper, access to green space. Hence, the main research questions in this study is, first, how does access to different types of green space vary for low-income households in Melbourne, Australia? And the second question is, how does low-income household relocation within metropolitan Melbourne affect access to green space over time? You may be wondering that why Melbourne? Melbourne is one of the most livable cities in the world. So the reason that we decided to conduct this study in Melbourne context is the rapid population growth, which is leading to rapid urban development and densification. This rapid urban development and densification is leading to green space degradation. For instance, looking at historical data from Landsat, and through utilizing image processing, we found that in east side of Melbourne, we have severe green space degradation. Just to have an example on that. And then another issue is Melbourne experienced the largest increase in property values over the past 25 years. And last but not least, the heat waves is predicted to reach 50 degrees of centigrade by 2040. So in this study, in the next slide, I talk about the data and method. We conducted this study utilizing essay 2, which is somehow close to the postcode area, and it's about approximately 7.5 kilometers and around 5,900 households live in each SA2. It's based on the Australian Bureau of Statistics definition. And then the socioeconomic data is come again from ABS. ABS defined low income as the proportion of lowest 40% in that area. Then regarding green space data, we used DELP data, and unlike previous studies, we utilized a measure of green space that incorporate all alternative green space locations weighted by distance and congestion. By congestion, I mean user population density, rather than proximity or share of locality. So if I give you a little background on this literature, some of the studies just assume that people just visit their closest green space, and that in this equation, they ignore the effect of other green space. So the method of this study is in a two-step. After developing the green space index, which I just take you through it, we conducted a local indicator of spatial association to determine the existence of bivariate statistically significant spatial clusters of low-income proportion and green space index. And to check the robustness, we use Mann-Whitney test to discern the spatial distributional relationship between low-income proportion and green space index. So in the next step, I talk about the main results. So looking at the result shows that the distribution of green space within the Melbourne metropolitan area is skewed toward wealthier neighborhood, as we discussed. So here you can see that we have in the orange color, we have high low income and low green space. And then in the next step, we thought that it's interesting to look at what type of green space. Is it a natural green space, or is it human modified, like parks and something that is somehow related to urban planning discipline? And then we run the model for natural green space and human modified ones, and we found that again in each type of this typology, we have inequality in access to green space. So it means somehow that urban planning has to date not succeeded in countering urban trends that shape inequality of green access for different socioeconomic groups. And one of the ways that we again were interested, so somehow the issue of inequality in access to green space like other urban amenities wasn't surprisingly for us. But we were thinking about what are the catalyzers of this relation. In the next step, we run the simple correlation to see that how the distribution of green space affecting this relationship. So as in this map, you can see we have the high human-made green space with about 70% correlation with where we have natural green space comparing with west side. You may talk about that about the history of development, but somehow based on the equity in this field, it means that if the new development areas going to, we are going to have land development, people are going to live in that area, so we need to conduct green space and develop it as well. And then in the next step, we were interested to see that again, what are the catalyzers of this relation. So there is a few studies just address the historical and contemporary social political process that have caused the inequality patterns. That means dwelling close to green space often trade at a price premium. As a result, poorer access to green space for low-income households could also arise out of lower purchasing power. Hence, there is a gap in our knowledge on the role of population mobility and residential relocation in shaping urban spatial patterns over time. So to analyze this relation, we look at the low-income household mobility since 2011 to 2016. And the result shows that low-income people are moving toward less greener area 3 times higher than the rest of population. So that means that population mobility is reinforcing and accentuating socioeconomic inequality in access to green space over time. In the next slide, I talk about why this study is important. This study is in line with sustainability development goals of good health, reduce inequality, and sustainable cities and community. And the results have implications for municipal decision-making in service and resource allocation and distribution in Australian and global cities. In Melbourne Metropolitan, we suggest prioritizing and implementing green space provision plans for low-income areas in which relatively high proportion of lower socioeconomic households reside. And also, local governance planning need to monitor access to green space as part of routine analysis of urban equality. We also suggest employing statistical and geographical tools for quantifying inequality, gauging the direction of inequality trends, and considering the result from an urban planning perspective. And finally, we suggest further investigation of the potential cause of inequality to help control them before negative outcomes become irreversible. So it's my last slide, and many thanks for listening.
Thank you so much, Franka, for your presentation, for bringing out these issues of inequity for us to know that the government is doing justice to others and injustice to the rest of us by providing green spaces somewhere, whereas others are not. But you made me a bit jittery. Now, if you are on this platform, you know where you are. Where you stay means you are in the low socioeconomic group or you are in the high socioeconomic group. So your status, you can't hide anymore.
Absolutely. It was a bit surprisingly for me as well. But yeah, it's the way that I think the conference, organized.
Oh, sure, that's a problem. I won't talk. You have made me realize where I stand. That is jittery, but that's okay. I think I saw Vince. Vince, you wanted to ask a question? Please, I invite the audience with questions to come in with all your questions.
That was before the previous presentation.
Okay. Any question for Farnas, please? Linda, that's a question maybe I should read.
Thank you, Linda.
Sure. I guess I'm just asking or wondering if you might be able to expand more on that last slide in terms of the importance of access to green space. And I guess at a time like this, for example, where we're only able to leave our homes for short periods of time for things like exercise, I'm wondering what value that has in terms of improving health outcomes and reducing inequality, and what those inequalities are that you're referencing.
Yeah, that's a great point. Just to let you know, Linda, this paper has been published, so somehow we can't do any, adding any extra modification to that. But yes, it's very interesting point, and we have a project just working on green space, and from Just City perspective, particularly during that COVID-19 time. And as we discussed, somehow, the inequity in access to green space is not something to be solved overnight. That's why, and we couldn't, no one could predict that what's going to happen, right, regarding the COVID-19 and, any potential issue. So somehow, green space can be looked at as a solutions for reducing these, as you mentioned, health issues during COVID-19, and like other, health and well-being.
Okay. Any more questions, please? Let me ask one question by myself. Did you find that areas where green spaces are, for example, in the eastern side of Melbourne, did you find that households are moving there or not?
Oh, well, we found that, when we developed the green space index, and statistically we are testing that, it means that low-income people are moving from low green index area toward less greener areas. So by that I mean they are moving toward west area.
Okay. So if the person is in a low income group, then you find that that person is likely to move to the western part of Melbourne, so probably.
So to just give you an overall view, because we have, comparing east and west side of Melbourne, it's, east side is quiet, greener comparing to west.
Okay. And did you try to check whether it has to do with, did you sort of control for some of these things like level of income, some of these things like quality of life, something like, did you control for some of them to make sure that you capture that in your modeling?
So somehow we considered all of the green space. By green space, I mean all of the urban open space. So it's include park, civic area, reservoir, all type of green space that we have available. But you point to another interesting issue that, it was surprisingly for me that we don't have green space typology in Australia yet.
Oh, okay. Any more questions, please? If you have any question. Any more? We have just about a minute more, and then we'll wrap up. All right, it looks like there are no more questions from our audience. I'll thank you so much for your presentation. To our presenters, all of you, Charles, and then Vince, and Faranas, thank you so much for your presentations. Very wonderful and insightful presentations. We've learned so much from all of you. And thank you so much for making yourself available for the African Studies Group Conference this year. Chair, I will come to you for you to then close the session for us, and then what next? Thank you so much.
Thank you, and I hope you've yielded back all my powers.
I have ceded all of them back to you, Chair.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Minta, for the very capable and fantastic chairing to the minute. So that was quite impressive. And thank you to our presenters for the really excellent work and the excellent research that you've shared. And being the first panel, you've kicked off the conference with quite some momentum. So the other panels have quite some work cut out for them. So we are at the top of the hour, and we have a break of 1 hour before the next session, which is on interventions. So 1 p.m. Melbourne time. So I'll see you all in an hour. Is there an announcement from the conference committee before we adjourn? No.
Nothing at the moment, yeah.
Nothing at the moment, great. So we'll see you all in an hour at the next session, which will be quite exciting. See you all.